Assalamu alaikum, dear friends and participants. Welcome to this session of Quran 14 series. And as you would be remembering that we have started to study the text of the Quran from various surahs. And today also we'll be studying a surah of the Quran, which is the 52nd surah. To be precise, it is called Surah Al-Tur. And the reason that we have started this journey of studying the text of the Quran, of course, is to make ourselves more closer to that God connection that all of us so very essentially require. So remember, the best way to know God is through His scriptures, through the Quran, of course, and then the rest of those scriptures which He revealed before the Quran had been sent down by Him. As far as the Quran is concerned, I keep reminding you of this fact that in order to have a better grasp of the subjects of the Quran, of the contents of the Quran, it is essential that we are aware of the topics of the Quran and the background in which the Quran was revealed. So remember, the Quran was revealed in a heavily polytheistic background. The idolaters of the Prophet's nation, they were themselves called as idolater or the al-mushrikun in the terms of the Quran. They worshipped idols and they were involved in heinous forms of polytheism. We know that the house of God, the Baytullah, the Kaaba, it had 365 idols placed within it. And these polytheists of Arabia, these idolaters of Arabia, and the technical name for them are the Ishmaelites, because of the fact that they were the progeny of the Prophet Ishmael. And as you would be knowing, that Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. So from Isaac, we have descendants from him as well, and the last of them was Jesus. And after them, after that the lineage finished, we have the descendants of the Prophet Ishmael, and the last one in that lineage was Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they inhabited the land of Mecca since ancient times, and they had been incriminated with this polytheism. So the bulk of the Quran, as I've always tried to make clear to you, actually deals with these polytheistic issues, the beliefs of these polytheistic nations, and the Quran's argument against polytheism. And simply put, the Quran has given them just one basic argument, which they never were able to reply to. The Quran says that if there had been one more God or more gods than God Himself, then the only possible source of this information was God. He would have told His creatures that, well, I created you and I have my partners, I have my associates, and just as you worship me, you have an obligation towards them as well. So if God has not informed us that there are more than one deities, He's the only one, this is a lie that has been fabricated against God. So that is why the Quran says that this is a lie. It's a falsehood which people have concocted. Because if there were more than one God, it would have been simple information which God Himself would have divulged. But because no such information has been given by God, if we still associate partners with Him, then this is, as I said, a fabrication and concoction. And precisely for this reason, because people have invented something, they don't have any basis for that. The Quran is very strict as well. In fact, the Almighty is very strict, and He says that all sins can be forgiven. But the sin of polytheism, if a person dies on it and deliberately associates partners with God, it has no forgiveness. So the surah that we are going to read today, Surah Al-Tur, as I said, which is the 52nd surah of the Quran, this surah actually also is a surah in which these idolaters are addressed, and the beliefs that they generally, of course, espoused, they are challenged. So besides the fact that they did not believe in God, or they did not believe in one God, to be precise, another thing which they did not believe was that there's going to be a day of judgment. So when some prophet would come to them, or of course in this case we know that Prophet Muhammad had come to them, If he warned them that if he denies the Prophet himself, then punishment is going to come to them in the hereafter, and not only in the hereafter, but in this world as well. So they better not deny the Prophet. And this denial, as I've been telling you, was not out of any confusion or any misinformation. It was deliberate denial. They acknowledged him to be a prophet of God, and in spite of that, they did not accept him out of arrogance. So the Almighty is very harsh on such people who, in spite of believing something, don't accept it. So Surah Tur, as you can see, is the name of the surah, and Tur actually is the name of Mount Sinai. And you know that Mount Sinai is a very famous mountain in Palestine. So this is where we can see that another feature of the Quran can be understood. You see, the name of a surah, as is the case with this surah, is not that it summarizes the content of the surah, as is the case of the names that we keep of our compositions. For example, if I write a book, the title of my book will always reflect the content of my book, isn't it? I mean, it's but natural for us that when we write a poem, when we write a story, when we write anything, whatever title we give is actually representing the content of the composition that we have made. This is not the case with the Quran. The Arabs never did this. So the way that they would name their surahs would be, they would just pick up any random sentence or a random word from within the surah which would actually catch their fancy, and they would start calling that surah by that name. So as I'm just going to display the surah before you, the very first word of this surah is Tur, or Tur. And as is the case with so many other surahs like Yasin and Taha and Noon, many a time the very first name or the very first word by which a surah begins becomes the title of the surah. So the point of note here is that don't think that when it says Surah Al-Tur, which means the mountain of Sinai, therefore the whole surah would revolve around stories or details about of this mountain. This is not the case here. As I said, the Quran and the way surahs are named in the Quran are not on the basis of their content. That is not how the Arabs used to do. And this is a cause of misconception also when we start reading the Quran, because when we pick up the Quran and we pick up the title of a surah, we generally think that the surah has to deal with whatever the title says. So please get this very, very clearly in your minds that this is not the case with the Quran, and we have to understand the Quran the way it is. So it's a composition in which the names are just picked up, and most of these names, you would also like to know, have been kept by the Sahaba, by the companions of the Prophet. And this is how they used to remember a surah, by a certain catchphrase, if you can call it a catchphrase. Okay, let's start studying the surah, and we'll discuss some of the important areas of this surah. As you can see, okay, so as is our custom, I'll read out the Arabic, and one of you is going to help us in reading out the translation, and in this way we'll try to finish the surah. So starting off, we are reading the first paragraph, which consists of the first 8 verses. It says, وَالطُّورِ وَكِتَابٍ مَسْطُورٍ فِي رَقٍّ مَنْشُورٍ وَالْبَيْتِ الْمَعْمُورِ وَالسَّقْفِ الْمَرْفُوعِ وَالْبَحْرِ الْمَسْجُورِ إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّكَ لَوَاقِعٌ مَا لَهُ مِنْ دَافِعٍ.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the ever merciful. The Mount of Sinai bears witness, and also the scripture inscribed on parchment unrolled. Similarly, this populated house, this earth of yours, bears witness, and the lofty roof of the sky, and the overflowing seas, also that indeed the punishment of your Lord is certain to come. No one can avert it.
So thank you for this translation. You see, as you can see, the opening paragraph of the surah actually warns the Ishmaelites, or the nation of the Prophet, because they were told that if they intentionally deny the truths, if they intentionally deny the prophets of God, then a punishment is going to visit them in this world. not just in the hereafter. Of course, they are going to be punished in the hereafter. But remember, the nations of all messengers of God have always been warned by their respective messengers of two punishments. For every messenger, there were two punishments regarding their nations. That once he had delivered the truth to them, once he had explained the truth to them, and they still denied, they would be punished in this world and they would be wiped off typically through disasters, through cyclones, through typhoons, through earthquakes, through all these natural calamities. And the respective messenger also told his nation that not only would they be visited by the punishment in this world, but in the hereafter as well, this punishment would continue. So you can see that every messenger has warned his nation of two punishments, one in this world and one in the hereafter. So this paragraph actually is addressing the first of these punishments, which is going to come in this world. And for this punishment, there are certain evidences which have been presented. Look at them one by one. The first of them is Wat-Tur, which means the Mount of Sinai. And Mount of Sinai was the one on which the prophet Moses was given the Torah, was given the book, of course, which was revealed to him. And this was given to him once the Israelites, to whom, or the nation of the Pharaoh towards whom he was sent, actually, they had been drowned in the sea because of their misgivings. So once that had happened, the prophet Moses was called to the Mount of Sinai, and then he was actually given this Torah, signifying the fact that, look, that this mountain of created by God tells us that nations who deny their respective messengers in this world are punished. So if they had denied Moses, which of course the nation of the Pharaoh did, so they had been drowned in this sea, in the Red Sea to be precise. So therefore, don't think that something like this would not come to you. So in other words, the people who are standing right in front of the Quran, who are the Quraysh or the Bani Ismail, the nation of the Prophet, they are being told that, look, the punishment which visited the nation, the people of Moses, to whom he was sent, of course, the nation of Pharaoh, just as they were destroyed for denying their messenger, you will also meet the same fate. So that Mount of Sinai is a big landmark which bears witness to this worldly reward and punishment. And next is Wakitabim Mastur, Fi Raqqim Manshur. This is taken as a whole, that a scripture inscribed on a parchment unrolled. You know what? This refers to the Torah, the Old Testament, because it would be prescribed, it would be written on a parchment in those times. And because of the fact that the history of the Israelites, the way they had been denying their prophets and the way they had been continuously being punished, has also been recorded in the Torah, in the Old Testament. Now that is being presented as a witness. So just as the Mount of Sinai gives this evidence that nations have been destroyed for for denying their prophets, similarly, the Torah itself gives this evidence that people or nations like the Israelites who have continued to deny their prophets, they have also been punished. And then next we have another entity which is presented as evidence. It says, Wal Baytil Ma'mur, which means this populated house of yours, referring to the earth that you live in. And the reason that the earth is presented as evidence here for the day of, for this punishment that is going to visit them in this world, is that this earth actually presents the Almighty's huge favor on mankind. This populated house of ours, of course, which is the earth, God is looking after this earth. God is taking care of the people who live in it. The seasons that He sends, the heavenly bodies like the sun and the moon, how they look after us. The elements of nature, rain, of course, the seas, all of them, they are meant to serve us. They show that the Almighty, if He has blessed us with these favors, then one day He is going to call us to account. So every favor actually entails some accountability. All privileges entail some accountability. It's not just that you're going to be blessed with certain favors and then not be held accountable for it. So this is the third evidence. And then it says the lofty roof, وَالسَّقْفِ الْمَرْفُوعِ وَالْبَحْرِ الْمَسْجُورِ. Again, وَالسَّقْفِ الْمَرْفُوعِ is something from which a lot of punishments had appeared for these nations who had destroyed, who had denied their respective prophets. So that tall, the tall roof, of course, referring to the sky, also bears this witness that whenever people became rebellious on this earth, this tall roof also was something which became instrumental in their destruction, because rain was sent down from the heavens and destroyed. For example, we know the people of Noah, they suffered this storm, which of course was as a result of the fact that a lot of rain burst on the earth, and of course the seas also, they exceeded their limits and they just swept everyone, which is precisely what is referred to in the next verse, which means wal bahril masjur, the overflowing seas. So they became a means of punishment for these nations once they had denied their respective prophets. So you see, these entities are presented as witness to the people of Quraysh who are standing right there, that the Mount of Sinai, the Torah itself, the populated house, which of course is the earth, the tall roof, which is the sky, the heavens, and these overflowing seas, all of them bear witness, what? That inna azab rabbika lawaqi, that all of these entities bear witness that the punishment of your Lord is bound to come, and it did come, and there is no one who can avert it. So, O people of the Prophet's nation, you better mend your ways, you better set yourselves right, otherwise you'll meet the same fate. Okay, now let's move on to the next paragraph. So, يوم تمور السماء مورا وتسير الجبال سيرا فويل يومئذ للمكذبين الذين هم في خوض يلعبون يوم يدعون إلى نار جهنم دعا هذه النار التي كنتم بها تكذبون أفسحر هذا أم أنتم لا تبصرون اصلوها فاصبروا أو لا تصبروا سواء عليكم إنما تجزون ما كنتم تعملون.
On the day when the sky will shake while shuddering and the mountains will start to move, so on that day misery to be to the deniers who, toying around, are engaging in pleasantries. On the day when they will be driven and shoved towards the fire of hell, it will be said to them, "This is the same fire you had been denying. Now speak up. Is this magic, or are you not being able to see anything? Go and enter into it. Then, whether you bear it or not, it is alike for you. You are being rewarded exactly with what you had been doing."
Thank you, Omar, for this translation. So you see, as is the general case with the Quran, that whenever it argues in front of a day of judgment, of course, in this case, which was brought about on the face of this earth, and is going to continue for these nations in the next world. Often it happens that the Quran then shifts to a description of that day of judgment. So once that day of judgment is proven, is verified, often it happens that as if that day has arrived, and suddenly a picture of that day is now being presented to people who had earlier been born. So this is basically a picture of the day of judgment. As you can see, that the mountains, they'll start to leave their places. And often in the Quran, whenever the day of judgment is described, mountains are specially referred to. You know why? Because in those times, the Arabs used to consider that everything might just be finished, might be destroyed. But they thought that these mountains, they simply cannot be destroyed because they are huge structures. So the Quran makes it a point to just tell them that, well, these huge structures shall also start to get dissolved and lose their places, and they'll just move about. So the first thing that is mentioned is that the sky will shake and shudder. Of course, giving that horrible picture that something bad is going to happen. The mountains will lose their places; they'll just dissolve. And it will then said to them that misery is now going to, and destruction is now going to come to these people. And look what this said: that they had engaged in pleasantries. They were least bothered that one day they'll be held accountable. So, my dear participants, you can clearly see that accountability is a huge subject of the Quran. This day of judgment is a huge subject of the Quran, and often it keeps us reminding that if you don't forget that you will be held accountable one day. And when accountability is going to take place, this earth is going to change, it is going to shake and shudder. And then what will happen is that these people, they shall be shoved towards the fire of hell once their account is taken. Once they are held accountable, once it is proven that, look, this is how uh, you were actually denying the prophets of God. You yourself did so in this world, in the previous world, and now again, this is the result that is going to ensue. So they shall be shoved towards this hell, and it is now as if they are being directly addressed and said, "Speak up. Is this magic, or are you being able to say nothing?" See, it's like adding fuel to fire, insult to injury, by telling them that, well, this is the fire you were denying in the previous world, and now it is staring you in the eye. It's right before you. Now you have to enter it. And whether you bear it or not, it is alike. I mean, it doesn't matter. You will be consigned to this fire. So this again is the same sequence in which these verses occur, that to the nations of the prophet who were denied intentionally, this is how things will be as soon as the day of judgment arrives. So thank you for reading translation, Omar. Let's now move on to the next paragraph. إن المتقين في جنات ونعيم فاكهين بما آتاهم ربهم ووقاهم ربهم عذاب الجحيم كلوا واشربوا هنيئا بما كنتم تعملون متكئين على سرر مصفوفة وزوجناهم بحور عين.
Sinay, you are up next. The righteous, however, will be in gardens and bliss, enjoying what their Lord has blessed them with, and that their Lord has preserved them from the torment of hell. Now eat and drink with relish as reward for the deeds you have been doing. They will be reclining on adjacent thrones, and we shall have wed them with large-eyed Horus?
Yes, Houris. Okay, so as is the case again that you must have become familiar with by studying the previous surahs, that as soon as the fate of the wrongdoers is mentioned, side by side, the fate of the righteous is also mentioned. So just keep the sequence of the Quran in mind. First, it argues about a miniature day of judgment in this earth, which is going to continue for the nations of the prophets in the hereafter, which is going to be a greater day of judgment. Then the picture of that day of judgment is presented. First, how the wrongdoers will be dealt in, that we have seen in the previous paragraph. Now comes the picture or the portrayal of how the righteous would be rewarded. So it says that the righteous will be in gardens and breasts, enjoying with what their Lord has blessed them with. So it's like that whole picture in which you are enjoying the favors of paradise, and you have been saved or secured from the punishment of hell, and you are being told that you can eat and drink to your relish whatever you would like to do, and you would sit, they would be sitting in front of each other. And this signifies a certain thing, and that is that when you face one another and you sit across one another, it will be as if you don't have any malice for one another, because sitting and facing each other always means that you are in a pleasant situation. You would like to talk to all kinds of individuals. Otherwise, remember, when we are not in favor with a certain people, or there is something that is has happened in our previous world, we generally tend to not even look at such people, and we just pass away. But this is not going to happen in paradise. In paradise, everyone will be talking to each other. They will be facing each other, and any malice that we have, any sort of ill feeling that we have for one another would have gone. And finally, it is said that وَزَوَّجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورٍ عِينٍ, that men, of course, will be wedded to Huris. Of course, these are the women of paradise, about which we see the Quran speaking of so often, that when people will go there, they'll find their life partners as well. And just to give you this picture, that because of the fact that the Quran generally speaks for the male gender, it does not mean that that women are not implied as a consequence, because at other places the Quran says azwaju mutahhara, which of course means that men would have pure women for them, and pure women would have pure men for them. So it's just a question of highlighting certain things at times, but it doesn't mean that this gift of the opposite gender, it would not be given to other all the genders. So for men there would be women, for women there would be men. And this actually points to the company that every one of us needs. All of us need the company of the opposite gender in some form or the other, because there is this strong bond between these genders. We have our emotional bond, we have the physical bond, we have the companionship bond. So, when you are living in the companionship of individuals whom you can really relate to, this is the height of delight. So, the Quran often refers to this fact that men and women who are pure and noble, they will be made to live in pairs there, they will be made to live together, and they will enjoy the company of one another. Okay, let's now move on to the next part. الذين آمنوا والذين آمنوا واتبعتهم ذريتهم بإيمان ألحقنا بهم ذريتهم وما ألتناهم من عملهم من شيء كل امرئ بما كسب رهين وأمددناهم بفاكهة ولحم مما يشتهون يتنازعون فيها كأسا لا لغو فيها ولا تأثيم ويطوف عليهم غلمان لهم كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون.
Those who have accepted faith and their children too have followed them with any level of faith, we shall unite their children with them in their level and not even slightly diminish the reward of their deeds. This is because each individual is in pledge for his own earning. We shall continue to provide them the fruits and the meat they like. In it, they will be acquiring cups of wine from one another, in which there will be neither be any nonsensical talk nor allegations of sins on others. And handsome boys like pearls preserved with will specially serve them in a diligent manner.
Okay, thank you for that, Saim. Now, as you can see, that picture of paradise is continuing in this paragraph. So, in order to enhance the pleasures, another feature of paradise is mentioned, and that is that if the parents are in a higher level of paradise and their children are in a lower level of paradise because of the fact that the nature of their deeds was such, then the Almighty would unite the children with their parents without diminishing the reward. They will not diminish the reward of the parents in any way, and the children, of course, will enter into the company of their parents. So again, something which the Quran tells us that one of the things that you also enjoy are your children. And these children, if they are living elsewhere in paradise and a lower level of paradise, which of course tells us that paradise will have various levels. Once you enter paradise, again, you'll be placed in various levels according to your reward that you're going to get and the deeds that you did in the hereafter. But in order to make a family united there, what the Almighty will do is that He'll place the children who would be in a lower level, in case they are in a lower level, right in the higher level with their parents, so that both of them can enjoy one another. And then it says that the Almighty shall provide them with all kinds of fruits. Again, these fruits are mentioned, and then it is said that they'll be served with wine. Again, the word wine should not be any cause of apprehension, because wine is a form of a drink. We don't should not compare it to the wines of this world, which of course are intoxicating. The wine of the paradise, of course, is something of a delight. It's like a drink which will soothe us. It's a drink which will be really, really relished because of its taste. It will not intoxicate us in any manner. It will not cause any heartburn or any head swinging motion, as is the case when you consume the wines of this world. So basically, it tells us that the best of drinks would be given to the people of paradise. And then it says that these cups of wine would be passed around, and they would be boys who would be serving this wine, and they would be, of course, people or boys who would be fully vigilant and diligent in this service for which they have been appointed. So basically, it's a picture of paradise being presented in which you are enjoying paradise. Now, one thing that you might notice here is that this picture is typically presented keeping in view the Arab mind, because this is how they used to enjoy life. And they are being told that if they want to really enjoy life, then this is something which they will have in the hereafter if they behave properly there. But because of the fact that they were the foremost addressees, of course, these details had to be told to them. But very similarly, people who came after them, like, for example, we who are living in our world today, for us, we might be having attractions or things that we like for ourselves, in a very different format. I mean, today the Quran would have been revealed. It would have, for example, uh, painted paradise in a way which is very, very attractive to us. So, if you want to connect with the paradise of the Quran, always remember that this paradise, the way the picture has been presented, is keeping in view the Arab mind. As far as we ourselves are concerned, the Quran tells us that whatever we want, we will get there. If you want to play golf there, if you want to play video games there, if you want to run around, if you have anything that comes to your mind vis-a-vis today's delights and today's sports and amusement, you'll have them there. But the Quran does not mention them, of course, because its addressees were the Arabs of those times and they were not aware of these things. But because of the fact that the Quran was meant for all times, it has mentioned that for the rest of the world, they can imagine that whatever they would wish for in their minds, it will be provided to them. Okay, let's move on then to the next paragraph. It says, وَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ قالوا إنا كنا قبل في أهلنا مشفقين فمن الله علينا ووقانا عذاب السموم إنا كنا من قبل ندعوه إنه هو البر الرحيم.
They will turn towards one another asking about the past. They will say, before this we used to remain fearful about our families. So God has been gracious to us and has delivered us from the blazing breeze of hell. Before this, we used to invoke the same Lord only. Undoubtedly, He is the keeper of His promises, the ever merciful.
So you see, once again, the picture of paradise is again continuing in this paragraph as well. It says that the people there who will be gathered there, they will ask this question and they would say that, well, have reached this place because we used to be fearful about our families, which means that we would always politely tell them that there are certain things that they should be doing and there are certain things which they should not be doing. In other words, the concern that we had for our families, in which we poured out that concern for them when they started doing something bad or wrong. We would advise them, we would counsel them. It was our responsibility to tell our family that, well, something is going wrong somewhere. So they are just remembering that this is how we behaved. And now, as a result of this attitude, we have landed in paradise. And God has been gracious to us. He has delivered us and secured us from the fury of the wind of hell. We know that hell, of course, not only consists of fire, there are various places in hell, as well as the fury of hell itself, or the flames of hell, in which there are compartments of hell. A better part of hell is fire, but from the Quran we know that hell contains other areas as well, which are besides fire. For example, there's boiling water. For example, there are areas in which people will be given to eat something and they would not be able to swallow it. So they are, as I said, just as there are different levels and grades of paradise, there are different levels of hell as well. And they would say that we were the people who used to invoke one God. So one of the things that have landed them in paradise is that they were monotheistic. They never associated anyone with God, and therefore God, who promised them that if they would not associate anyone with Him, he will admit them into His paradise. So this is how they would remember their past. They will be in paradise and talking about how they behaved in the previous world, and that behavior actually was instrumental into bringing them into this paradise. Okay, let's move on. فذكر فما أنت بنعمة ربك بكاهن ولا مجنون أم يقولون شاعر نتربص به ريب المنون قل تربصوا فإني معكم من المتربصين أم تأمرهم أحلامهم بهذا أم هم قوم طاغون أم يقولون تقبله بل لا يؤمنون فليأتوا بحديث مثله إن كانوا صادقين.
Therefore keep reminding, O Prophet, and pay no heed, because by the grace of your Lord you are neither a soothsayer nor one possessed. Do they say that he is a poet for whom we await an adverse termination? If so, wait. I shall also wait with you. Does their intellect prompt them to say this, or are they a people rebellious? Do they say that he himself has concocted this Qur'an? No, this is not so. In fact, they do not want to believe. So, if they are truthful, let them produce a discourse having the same majesty.
Thank you, Nida, for this reading. Okay, now you see the discourse or the surah actually directs attention of the Prophet. It turns to the Prophet himself. Remember, the Prophet was a human being. Of course, he was a messenger of God. But being a human being, because of the fact that his people would call names to him, they would make fun of him, they would mock at him, uh, the Prophet would get very sad. He would get sorrowful that instead of the fact that his nation should be maybe coming closer to him because he has no personal interest, he has no personal gain. All that he's doing is for the cause of God. He's calling them towards a certain truth. And in spite of this, they are not listening to him and they are doing all sorts of things which are really, really a source of harassment to the Prophet. So he would feel sad. So look what the Almighty says. He actually assures the Prophet. He tells them that don't worry, your job is to just convey the truth to them. And if your opponents call you a soothsayer or a magician or a madman, just ignore them because this is a way they have found to escape the truth. They are blaming everything on you, and as far as you are concerned, you are not at all blameworthy. So you see how the Almighty connects with Prophet Muhammad, and it shows that Prophet was a human being like us. That when people started to tease him and they started to harass him and they started to call him by these names, that he's a madman, he's a wizard, or all sorts of these things, that would bother him a lot, and he needed this assurance from the Almighty so that he could once again have the courage and the him and the strength and the inner power to counter their moves. So again, the Quran once again addresses them and says, "Am ta'murum ahlamun bihaza am hum qawmun taghun," which means that does their intellect prompt them to say this, that he's a wizard or he's a magician or all these things, or is it that there are people rebellious? You see, what happens is that they are doing all of these things, and the Quran is telling them that, well, instead of reflecting on the arguments, instead of being cautious, instead of looking at the content that he is presenting, just because he is telling them of something which is against their interests and because of which they might have to mind their ways and mend their affairs, they are doing all sorts of these things, and they think that again to in order to lessen the influence of the Quran on the masses, because the Quran was a very powerful word of Arabic, because the Arabs were literally very, very highly educated or highly appreciative of classical Arabic, and when the Quran spoke of them, they would be really impressed by the Quran. So in order to lower this impression, what they would say is that this Quran is poetry. It's nothing but poetry. It's an eloquence. It's a magic of words. So that their masses are somehow led to believe that this is not from God. It is something that Prophet himself has fabricated. And then it is here that the Quran says, well, if you think it's a fabrication, if you think that the Prophet himself has concocted this Quran, then why don't you, who boast to be such highly literary individuals, you also come up with something similar to the Quran? If the Prophet can fabricate it, if he can produce something of a scripture or a book like the Quran, you are much more literary, you are much more educated. Why don't you do something similar? And this is one of the challenges of the Quran which it gave to the Arabs, which they could never answer. And remember, this is something which all of us should understand, that at times when we have no argument to stop or no argument to deny the truth, these are some of the excuses that people used to make in the times of the Prophet in order to counter the Quran, of course, and Prophet Muhammad. Okay, let's now move on to the next part. أم خلقوا من غير شيء أم هم الخالقون أم خلق السماوات والأرض بل لا يوقنون.
Ask them, if they do not believe in the hereafter, then have they been created without any creator, or are they their own creators? Or have they created the heavens and the earth? No, this is not the case. In fact, they do not have conviction.
Okay, thank you, Mustafa, for this translation. Again, you see, one of the things that the Quran often brings up is that if they don't believe that there is someone who is going to create them once again, then it poses this question to them, that have they been created themselves? There is no God who has created them, or they have it is something that they have been created without a creator. So if that is not the case, then the only option is that they are their own creators. So it's like again posing this question, and the question is not meant to elicit an answer. It's just like a question in which they are being told that the answer is so obvious, and they still deny. And if they are creatures, then they have to realize that there is a creator. There is a creator for every creature, for every created thing. There is a creator, and if they have not created themselves, then the logical answer is that someone else has created them. So they have to understand this. Once again, if they think that these heavens and the earth, they have been created, it is they who have been created by them, then you should understand that, of course, this is a claim that is absolutely false. They have not created the heavens and the earth. The Almighty has created the heavens and the earth. So, therefore, they have to have conviction that there is a creator who can recreate them. There is a creator who is going to call them to account, and they should just reflect on their own selves to realize this. You see that again, the argument of the Quran is continuing vis-a-vis the nation of the Prophet, and repeatedly it is telling them that they are arguing on flimsy grounds. They don't have any basis to defend whatever they are saying, and ultimately they'll have to face a very, very painful torment for that. Okay, let's move ahead. أم عندهم خزائن ربك أم هم المسيطرون أم لهم سلم يستمعون فيه فليأت مستمعهم بسلطان مبين أم له البنات ولكم البنون.
What has made them arrogant? Do they alone have the treasure of your Lord, or are they alone in charge of them? Do they have a ladder that they climb and overhear the information of the heavens, that they will be in bliss there as well? If it is so, then let the ones who has heard this bring a clear proof. They should only reflect on their beliefs. As He, the Creator of the heavens and the earth, have daughters whereas you have sons?
So thank you, Musa, for this reading. Again, you see, these questions are posed towards these disbeliefs, and again, the purpose is not to get an answer for them. The purpose is that they clearly know the answer, and these questions have been raised so that they can reflect in their hearts, or at least realize that since they have no answers, then they must accept what the truth is. So again, as the verse starts off, the paragraph starts off with these words: that do they alone have the treasure of their Lord, or are they in charge of them? Which means, of course, that because of the fact that they were very well placed in life, they used to think that if ever there's going to be a day of judgment, then if God has blessed them with a lot of wealth and riches here, the same would happen in the hereafter. And it is here that they're being told that how come this is going to happen there as well, because this place of this world has been made for trial and test, and the next world is made on the basis of reward and punishment. So you just cannot equate the two. And have they seen something of the future that they are making this assumption that if they are blessed with a lot of riches and wealth here, same will happen when they go to the next world. And finally, the important thing that we need to understand here, my dear friends, is that these idolaters, they used to worship the angels, and they used to call them the daughters of God. So all the angels that they used to worship, they used to call them daughters of God, and they used to think that if we worship these daughters of God, then if there is going to be a day of judgment, if ever there's going to be a day of judgment, they'll go there, and these daughters of God, because of the fact that they had worshipped them, they will be able to secure them and deliver them from God's wrath and God's anger. And here the Quran is making this point that you are ascribing daughters for God, whereas when you have daughters for your own self, you dislike it. How strange and how stupid is this, that you don't like daughters for your own self? Because the mindset of the Arabs in those times was that they would prefer the male child because of the fact that he would be a working hand. And in tribal culture, you need more people, you need more boys who would defend the territory, who would work for the head of the family. So they would always welcome the birth of a boy, and they would not at all be happy when a daughter would be born to them. So they are being told that on the one hand, you don't even like a daughter for your own self, and on the other hand, you are ascribing a daughter for God. How wrong a judgment they make, that what they don't like for themselves, they are ascribing to God Himself. So again, this is an argument which is made. But as I said, the purpose is to make them reflect that this is how foolish they are in their arguments, and they should try to understand, because this is the last warning that they are being given. Once their time is up, these warnings will not come anymore, and they'll have to face punishment. Okay. أم تسألهم أجرا فهم من مغرم مثقلون أم عندهم الغيب فهم يكتبون أم يريدون كيد فالذين كفروا هم المكيدون أم لهم إله غير الله سبحان الله عما يشركون.
Why don't they listen? Do you ask some reward from them that they are being burdened with its penalty? Do they have knowledge of the unseen? Thus they write in down themselves, and do not need any prophet for their guidance. Do they intend to contrive a plot? Then those who have disbelieved will themselves be trapped in it. Do they have another deity besides God who will save them? Certainly not. Exalted is God above what they associate with him.
Okay. Thank you for this translation. And you can again, you said clearly see that barrage of questions is continuing, and this is the force of the Quran. It starts off in a particular way, and clearly you can see that the last 2 or 3 paragraphs are nothing but composed of these questions, one question after the other, which is meant to make them reflect. And the extent of these questions, as I said, when they occur in such a sequence and in such rapid succession, is to make them realize how their folly is in making these bad judgments. So again, it starts off by saying that, is it that the Prophet is asking them for a reward when he is presenting his message, and therefore they are burdened by the fact that, well, if I have to hate the Prophet, then I'll have to pay him for something for all his services. This is not the case. And why is it that they are still denying him? And then is it that they're guides themselves? They don't need any divine guidance, and they have guidance themselves, and therefore they don't need the Prophet's guidance. You can clearly see that the answers of these questions are in the affirmative, and they can know the answer themselves. Therefore, as I said, the answer is not given. So if they are trying to contrive a plot, of course, which means that they are trying to deny, they're not trying to deny in front of the Prophet, but maybe in their own hearts they have a different plan. So they have to remember that all their plans are going to be brought to zero, because God is the one who is the master planner, and he is going to defeat all these plots. And finally, you see, once again, the surah, as we near its end, it again talks about their basic belief, and that is that they believed in more than one God. And they say, and this is how the Quran addresses them: that am lahum ilahun ghayrullah. Do they have other deities besides God? How come that they have deities? Because if they were other deities besides God, only God would have told them. Only God would have disclosed them. They are making a wild guess, a wrong guess. They are doing something for which they were not authorized. So therefore, they will have to face the consequences of this, because exalted is God above what they associate with him. He doesn't have any associates. It's their own fabrication that they are facing, and one day they'll have to encounter a very evil fate for that. وَإِن يَرَوْا كِسْفًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ سَاقِطًا يَقُولُوا سَحَابٌ مَرْكُومٌ فَذَرْهُمْ حَتَّى يُلَاقُوا يَوْمَهُمُ الَّذِي فِيهِ يُصْعَقُونَ يَوْمَ لَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُمْ كَيْدُهُمْ شَيْئًا وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ.
They will not profess belief, and even if they see a fragment of the heavens falling down, they will say, "These are but layers of clouds that are coming forth." So leave them alone till they encounter their day when they shall lose their senses, the day when their guiles will not be of any guiles will not be of any avail to them, nor they be helped.
So thank you, Mahin, for this reading. Again, you can see that that barrage of questions is now, although still continuing, but the tone has changed a little, and it is as if they are being once again told that they have to reconsider what they are now thinking. And one of the things is that, as I said earlier on, that whenever these people would be threatened that if they deny their messenger, then there is going to be a punishment that is going to visit them in this very world. And more often than not, this punishment would come from the sky, like, for example, the clouds, the rains, the storms. They would build up and destroy them. So reference is actually given to this phenomena. And it is said that, well, if they see that there is a fragment of heavens falling down on them, of course, which means that there is rain coming, they will, instead of thinking that this is the rain that's going to destroy them, instead of thinking that, they think, well, these clouds are now coming forth so that they are going to drench us and they are going to make our crops grow and develop, without realizing that this is not the rain that they're thinking of. This is the rain of destruction. So now, once again, the Prophet is addressed and told, well, you leave them, just leave them alone, because you have done enough to make them understand. Now they are going to face God's anger because they are now intentionally bent upon denying the truth. It's not that out of any confusion that they are denying, it's because out of arrogance they are denying. So one day they'll now encounter the day in which they'll lose their senses, which of course means that they'll be knocked down, and where their guiles will not be of any avail to them. Guiles, their plots, their schemes, the machinations and their conspiracies, they're not going to avail them, and they shall not be helped. So once again, as the surah is drawing to a close, their fate is being depicted. Remember, the surah started off in a certain fashion, and now that it is ending, the same topic is being brought up. It started off with the fact that these phenomena, like the Mount of Sinai, the Torah, the populated house, which is the earth, they all bear witness that there is a punishment that is going to come to them. And now, once again, as the surah is drawing to a close, the same topic is brought up, that one day they'll be made to realize that that punishment is going to come, and it will knock them down. They will not even realize that it has come, and then they shall neither be helped, and they shall neither have any support of the brethren of the tribe that they now possess. وَإِنَّ لِلَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا عَذَابًا دُونَ ذَلِكَ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ وَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ حِينَ تَقُومُ وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَسَبِّحْهُ وَإِدْبَارَ النُّجُومِ.
For these wrongdoers there is another punishment besides this, but most of them know it not. So leave them alone, and with perseverance wait for your Lord's decree. They will not be able to harm you. You are before our eyes, and to acquire perseverance, glorify your Lord and praise Him when you get up from sleep for the prayer, and glorify Him in the night also and at the declining of the stars.
So thank you for this reading once again. So this is the last paragraph of the surah, and again it is, as I said, drawing to a close on the same note with which it began earlier on. And here actually what they are being told is that before that final day of judgment, in which they are going to be destroyed, there is another punishment besides this, which of course is referring to the punishment of this world. So as we just discussed when we started off the surah, that for the messengers' nations, they are always warned of two punishments, one which is going to come in this world and another which is going to come in the hereafter. So this is precisely what is being referred to here, that for them there is another punishment, which means punishment of this world, but most of them are not aware of it. And now finally when the surah ends, the last two verses of the surah are directly addressed to Prophet Muhammad. And as I said, remember, he was a human being of flesh, the same flesh, of the same emotions that we were. Of course, he was a very extraordinary person, but remember, he had the same emotions as we have. So he would become very, very worried, very sad. Also, he would be very, he would be very apprehensive that why is that these people are not accepting the truth, because he has done his best to deliver the truth to them. And he would become at times impatient also. So the Almighty had to assure the Prophet. And again, you can see this assurance in these last verses. It tells the Prophet that be patient. You should not hurry up the matters, because as far as these people are concerned, you cannot force them to accept the truth. So you have to wait with perseverance the decree of God, God's directive, because this is something which only God knows when the time for punishment has come. His job is to to deliver the truth. As far as the Almighty is concerned, He's going to take care of them. And look at these last verses, how beautifully and how affectionately the Prophet is addressed by the Almighty. And the words are, فَإِنَّكَ بِأَعْيُنِنَا, and it says that, well, you are before our eyes. Don't think that we have left you. You see, at times the Prophet would feel lonely. He would feel as if, because nothing is happening, maybe the Almighty has plans in which his patience, of course, that he already acknowledged would be further tested. And but as human beings, all of us need this assurance. So look how beautiful this assurance is from God Himself. God says, "Innaka bi ayunina." I can see you. You are in front of our eyes. Don't worry. All that you should do in order to strengthen yourself, in order to overcome this impatience, is that you glorify your Lord and praise Him. Now, this expression of glorifying God and praising Him, which occurs often in the Quran, always refers to the prayer. So, because in the prayer we glorify Him, we praise the Almighty, we thank Him. So, Sabbih bihamdi rabbika is an expression in which the prayer is referred to, and especially the night prayer, the tahajjud prayer. So, you see, the prophets of God, and especially Prophet Muhammad, was told that in order to become a strong individual from inside, in order to strengthen his inside, in order to ward off these threats, and in order to face these evil remarks of his followers with patience, the best thing that he can do is offer the night prayer. Because when he gets up at night and he praises the Almighty, he glorifies Him at that time, that is something which gives you special strength. And now that the month of Ramadan, as you know, is around the corner, almost a month left. So when we get up for suhoor or sehri, when we have that food just before starting our fast, if we are able to offer that tahajjud prayer, for example, the 3 witrs that we offer with Isha, if we just don't offer them at Isha and we delay them and we offer those witrs at the time of our sehri, then this is a way of offering the tahajjud prayer. So today also we can reap the blessings of that night prayer, because you see, the Almighty has told us in the Quran that this is the most special moment in the whole 24 hours that we pass through. That night prayer just before dawn, if we are able to pray to God, then this is the most blessed time. Desires and du'as are accepted. I mean, they are according to God's plan as well. But this is the time when God's attention is directed towards human beings the most. And precisely this is the reason why Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his times was also directed that if you want to gain strength, if you want to reap the blessings of the Almighty, then you get up before dawn and you start praying to Him, you make dua to Him, you talk to Him, and this will give you inner strength, and this will give you that perseverance which is needed for Him in that mission, which of course was not easy at all. So with these last verses, my dear friends and my participants, we come to an end to this surah. The basic message of the surah, as you can clearly see, is that these people of the Prophet's nation who were denying them, they are told how clearly that they have been mistaken in their estimations, and how clearly one day they'll have to face God. Okay. In case you have any questions, of course, this is the time. Otherwise, there is one thing that I would like to ask you, as you have been studying the text of the Quran in the past couple of surahs as well. So, why do you think that the bulk of the Quran? Anyone can answer this question. That why do you think that the bulk of the Quran actually talks about polytheism? And polytheism, of course, is something which we don't find today, at least rampant the way it was in the times of Prophet Muhammad, because although we have our Hindu brothers and sisters and Chinese brothers and sisters who are in some forms guilty of polytheism, but it seems that their beliefs are not even addressed. So why is it that we find a very large part of the Quran addressing polytheism? And when we study polytheism in this regard, we often think that how does it relate to us? So what would be your answer? Anyone who would like to share his views or her views? Amira, anything that you'd like to say? Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, I think it's because Prophet Muhammad he was in this environment of polytheism, and the Quran was sent down in this thing that the polytheism needed to be converted back to Islam, and also because polytheism is shirk, and that's one of the main things that like it goes against the first pillars of Islam, which is belief in one God. Yes,
right.
It's a belief in one God. So I think it's something that's the worst sin.
Okay.
That's where it's also the most addressed to in the Quran.
Most of stuff. Oh, thank you for that, Amira. Okay, another question is that in the beginning of the surah that we studied today, we have the Quran telling us that Mount Sinai bears witness to the fact that the reward and punishment that the Prophet is promising his addressees is bound to take place. So, why is it that Mount Sinai is being presented as a witness? I think I just explained it when I was discussing the surah. So, any one of you would be remembering that what is the evidence or what is the testimony of Mount Sinai? Ariba, would you like to answer this question?
Could you repeat the question?
The question is that we started the surah, we just started off the surah, it said that Mount Sinai bears witness that there's going to be a reward and punishment for people in this world who deny their prophet. So how does Mount Sinai bear this evidence? How does it give this witness?
I think something was sent or something.
Right? What was sent there? So remember what Mount Sinai stands for? Amira, could you take up from here?
So you told us that Mount Sinai is where the Torah was revealed to Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and it became a symbol for the punishment that was given to the Pharaoh.
To the Pharaoh and his nation, absolutely correct. So that's very well done, Amira. So you see, this is how the Quran calls into witness historical events. So people who were standing right before them, they very well knew all these anecdotes. So the Pharaoh's anecdote, the anecdotes of the previous nations, they were very well versed with these details. So all that the Quran needed to tell them was that if they repeat this behavior with their prophet, something which happened to their predecessors who were similar to them will happen to them. So Mount Sinai is something, of course, which bore witness because it was this place on which Prophet Moses was called. He was given the Torah, the Old Testament, and we know that the Torah itself, because the next thing which is mentioned right after Wat-Tur is that the Torah also bears witness to this reward and punishment, because in the Torah or the Old Testament, we have the record of the Israelites and how the Almighty has continued to punish them for their misdoings in this world, bearing witness to the fact that, okay, yes, one day this is going to happen to the rest of the people as well. Okay, one more question. And that is, why is it that this surah is called Surah Al-Tur, which is, of course, Sinai? And any particular reason that the surah is called Surah Al-Tur? Aziz, why is the surah called Surah Al-Tur?
Because it serves as sort of a warning for the non-believers in a way.
No, my question is slightly different. You see, normally you would expect the title of the surah to explain the contents. We don't find Mount Sinai, which is of course the meaning of the word Tur, being discussed all over in the surah. We would expect that the title of the surah should reflect the content. How come it is called Mount Sinai or Sinai when we don't find? Yeah, go ahead.
Because of what it symbolizes.
What's that?
The punishment that will befall the non-believers.
So for that, it could have been called any other surah, any other word as well, because there are several things which signify that punishment in the surah. Any particular reason that why is it that Tur has been picked?
Because it's also where Hazrat Musa received the book.
Yes, but as I said, that normally the title of a surah, I mean, when I write a book, I would always name the book according to the contents. For example, if I write a book on the history of the World War, my title would be, for example, the events of World War I. And the title would say that the whole book actually contains something regarding World War I. But when I give the title Tur, and I find the word Tur just occurring in the first verse, and the rest of the surah has nothing to do with the word Tur. So how is it that I mean, you start naming a surah and the name does not reflect the rest of the contents? Okay, Amira, do you remember what I said? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, you said that the Sahaba, the people who kept the name of the surahs, they didn't necessarily reflect the content. It was basically something to remember the surah, like a catchphrase or something like that.
Right, absolutely right. So absolutely correct. So you see, but the way in which the Arabs used to name the surahs, it never represented the content of the surah. It never meant to represent. I mean, there are exceptional cases, but more often than not, the title would be picked from any random word of within the surah, which would catch their attention, which would catch their fancy, and they would start calling that surah. So always remember. Now, this is a very important thing that all of you need to remember, that the surahs of the Quran, they are not named because their names reflect the contents of the surah. For example, Surah Nisa. Now, Nisa in Arabic means women. This is the fourth surah of the Quran. So if you start, you pick up the Quran, pick up the fourth surah, it would say the surah in most English translations would be translated as women. So surah about women. And when you pick up the surah, you'll find it's about almost 200 verses or close to that. And there are about only 10 or 15 verses which relate to women, or maybe even less. So don't be misled by the fact that if the title says women, so therefore the surah is about women. No, this is not the case. The way in which the Arabs, and particularly the Quran, is one of the exponents of how the Arabs would name their compositions and their books, is that they would never, I would say, or very seldom name the surahs on the basis of the contents. They would just pick up any event. So, just to give you another example, we have Surah Baqarah. Baqarah in Arabic means the cow. Now, the Surah Baqarah is the biggest surah of the Quran. It has 286 verses. 286 verses. The incident of the cow, the Baqarah, is mentioned in just about 3 or 4 verses in the beginning. But because of the fact that the incident caught the fancy of the Arabs, they started calling it the Surah of Baqarah. In other words, initially they used to say, well, a surah which is in which the incident of Baqarah is mentioned. The surah in which the incident of Baqarah is mentioned. Slowly, this long sentence shortened into Surah Baqarah. So instead of saying the surah in which Baqarah is mentioned, it came ultimately to be Surah Baqarah. Similarly, here, it would have been a surah in which Tur has been mentioned. The surah in which Tur has been mentioned, which is of course the Mount of Sinai. So instead of having that whole sentence, the surah in which Tur has been mentioned, it just got shortened to Surah Tur. The middle part, which explained the whole concept, that the surah in which the Mount of Tur is mentioned, this got shortened into just Surah Tur. So this is how the Arabs used to name their compositions, and always remember that this is something that will help you when you start reading the Quran in more detail. Okay, so thank you very much for being today with us, and we had a very pleasant reading of Surah Tur, and I do hope that in future, inshallah, we'll be coming up with more surahs, and you'll be coming closer to that scripture that we call Quran, especially because it tells us how the Almighty used to deal with past nations. And as I said, if you have a grasp of the topic of the Quran, which of course is the fact that there is going to be a day of judgment, and for that day of judgment in the hereafter, these lesser days of judgments or smaller days of judgments in the times of God's messengers bear evidence. You'll understand how the whole topic of the Quran revolves around this one theme, that there is going to be accountability, and this is something that we must never forget. So thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll see each other next Sunday. Have a pleasant and a wonderful week. And it's bye-bye and Khuda Hafiz from your teacher.